So there's just a quick view, and it was interesting to hear John sounding off some of the benefits of plantation forestry. The pilot project, well, probably just as an introduction, Mondi, of course, has been working with ecosystems for a while. That's the nature of forestry. But just included in the slides for you, just a couple to show the impact and the dependence, of course, that we have, but how some of this can be turned around in a really positive way. This is just an example of an old wetland that was under agriculture and drained for over 100 years. And a year later, it returned its water regulation function, your filtering and your sediment correction. In addition, of course, it is now providing a habitat that is changing more and more towards biodiversity. So this is the sort of potential we're looking at. The scope that Mondi chose was 3 areas, and I'd like to say right from the outset it was great having WRI hold our hands right the way through it. I think we were very lucky we chose the right sites. We chose one in the temperate zone, Shanduka in the Midlands areas, Tiger's Kloof in between, and on the coast was Tiekubeka, which is a coastal, and it's right next to a World Heritage Site. In fact, it's now part of the World Heritage Site. And the idea was just to test and see what sort of trends we got. Now, in identifying the priorities, we went through a process following the ESR, and as we expected, of course, water came out very strongly. There's the 2 cases, the water regulation and the freshwater system. That's the most important. But it did highlight a few others, and certainly we'll pick up on to those a little bit later on. The next thing was analyzing the trends in priority services, and for that process we harnessed a whole batch of specialists. And for me, this is one of the real strengths of the ESR, is that it brings together these very bright minds, people working on ecosystems from all different points of view. This was a very rewarding process. It helped us. And what you can see there is that 6 of the 7 catchments, this is why water was such a priority, were over-allocated. So we know there's trouble coming. There are obviously the direct drivers, overconsumption. On our case, we had invasive alien species. And of course, our pines are, the plantation areas, of course, are exotic species. Also, it outlined the big impact that external users have, particularly agriculture, which is using massive amounts of water and largely inefficiently in those areas. And then there's indirect ones. The next step was to identify the business risks and opportunities. And this is really what our summary looked like. Freshwater dominated as we expected, but what we didn't expect was the strong pushback from the stakeholders and the experts that Mondi's invasive aliens are seen as really a big threat, not only to the water systems and the use of water, but to biodiversity. So that came out and was a very useful pointer for us. The biomass fuel was potential, and of course livestock and grazing, grasslands, these are very closely linked. The next stage is develop a strategy, and just to illustrate a couple of examples, as I said, the water scarcity was the dominant factor in these over-allocated catchments. We were already dealing with exotic plantations who had picked up a reputation of biodiversity deserts, and their impact on water, of course, is quite severe if they're planted in the wrong place. This just gives you an idea of some of the density. And what the ESR did identify was that there's a large potential for using the clearing of the aliens in terms of generating biofuels. The delineation of all the wetlands in Mondi was part of our process. It was really instituted before the ESR. But since then, with this very high identification of water scarcity, we've now done a full assessment of all our wetlands. And if you look at the left-hand column, there's the 4 regions covering, as I said, from subtropical through to the temperate. We'd love to have green smiley faces everywhere, but when you look at the history of the wetlands, where they come from, it's still showing this tremendous improvement. Once you bring them in, you make them part of your strategy, you recognize their importance of the wetland ecosystems as part of the freshwater. Some of the external stakeholders obviously are using water inefficiently. The large irrigators, etc. And there was identified an opportunity for Mondi to save water within the catchment and have the opportunity to maybe bring that in as additional plantation areas. Ecotourism was highlighted, and this is Isimangaliso. It's a very special area, a part of a World Heritage Site. And what this has done for us at the time, it really did confirm all the areas that were identified by the ESR. And since then, we just realized what real value of biodiversity is if you have properly managed plantations where they've recognized the sensitive ecosystems like water, riparian areas, and corridors. And this is the result that you can have. So we haven't really utilized this ecotourism potential fully, but the Isimangaliso Wetland Park, of course, is making full use of it. So just to conclude, this is the final slide. We focused on the water because that was the dominant one. The invasive alien program is now the leading example in our forestry sector in the country, and we see long-term savings here too. Also, of course, the release of water and the huge improvement in the wetland riparian areas where these dominantly are for biodiversity. We need to do some more work on the potential for biomass. There's huge potential, and Mondi generates a lot of its own energy, so this fits very comfortably. So I think just for that, to leave us a bit of question time, that would summarize the Mondi area. Just to add that we will and are part of the ecosystem valuation with WDC, and one of the areas is included in this. So we see the very close link between both. Thanks, Suzanne.